Good evening, everyone, to my fellow Malaysian friends. And it's 1 o'clock in here in London. Thanks a lot for tuning in. And I'm Gary. I'll be the host. And also along with me, I have Nick from Pocket Square. So just a brief introduction about this episode is much more like preambles and also introduction to give you an idea why are we doing this. There must be a certain motivation that why we are doing this, and what I thought is kind of urgency in a way, is kind of something important that we should talk about. I think that's pretty much part of my interest as well. We will do a brief introduction about two of us, and then after that we'll go on with more topics. So without further ado, hi Nick, how are you doing?
I'm good. Excited to be here.
Good to see you here, because how I know you is because of another Nick as well.
So many Nicks.
Yeah. I think it's quite interesting to mention that you used to teach in Taylor's as well. That's perhaps how I know you. Perhaps you can give a brief introduction about yourself. What are you doing now, and what do you expect from these coming few episodes on our topic, conversations on creative entrepreneurship?
Mm-hmm. Well, my name is Nick. I run a design and build studio called Pocket Square. We've been doing it for the past 8 years. My background is in architecture. So I was in Taylor's as well, a student like you. I did 3 years in Taylor's, and I did about 4 years in Aberdeen in Scotland. And then I practiced as an architectural assistant in Singapore that was about 4 years, and before I decided to come back. So I came back in 2014 and been running my practice ever since.
Yeah, and I noticed from your profile, most of the projects is much more interior and refurbishment project.
Yeah, which is quite interesting. It was when I came back, I wanted to take just anything at all, because I haven't actually been employed in Malaysia before this. I haven't worked internship or anything. Of course, just a part-time job in shopping malls, so that's not counted. So I don't really know the culture, what's the way of doing things. So when I came back, I had to relearn a lot of things. And the initial goal was to do anything I can get my hands on. Repair your bathroom, just to go have a look at the properties in Malaysia and the market. Because I know it's going to be very different from Singapore. When I was in Singapore, we did single family homes, so your bungalow, your semi-Ds, building from ground up. So that was actually my initial target when I came back here. So I wanted to start small, start with interiors and then build my way back up. But then halfway through, I realized that I'm not that interested in that realm anymore. And so over the years, we had to do a lot of business decisions to adjust and to course correct, to pivot. Maybe I wouldn't say pivot because it's still the same industry, but just to course correct based on my situation, what I like to do. And the company, I would say I see it almost like a good friend of mine. So we are like learning together in parallel. So certain things that I'm learning about myself personally, that I apply to the company, and that's how the situation it is now. So we do mostly residential interior design and build. There are architectural components in there, like building extension, and we're involved in end of this year. We're gonna turn a 1-story terrace house into a 2.5 story. So that's what's in the work. So I don't see it as a completely separate from architecture, just maybe parts of it, or not the conventional architecture practice.
Well, I think in speaking of the word architecture as a profession is very broad, and there's no such definition of saying, oh, across this line is called interior, across this line is called architecture. But in the end, it's much more dealing with construction and building that's pretty much relevant in the sense.
I think the clearer distinction is your qualification. Like, are you a part 3 architect or not? That if you're not and you're doing interior, I think then that's another story.
Yeah. I mean, that could be one of the episodes that we're gonna talk about in one of the 5. So today is the first one. I will do a brief introduction about myself, and then later on we can go through the list that all our audience can actually expect in the following 4 episodes. And along the way, we will invite different kind of creative individuals and also interview them. What do they think about creative entrepreneurship and how do they run their practice? even though it's not really, a big corporate, and I must, make a disclaimer here. We are not like, like business guru in a sense, but we just thought to share our insights about business. Well, you can criticize and say, oh, if you know how to do business, why don't you run a practice of like 20 people or reach things like this? No, I think in the end is a part of our passion and interest in sharing knowledge about business. And the whole idea of business is very broad. It's not just about money making. It's also about the value, that how can we provide the best value for our customers, and also what can we learn for ourselves. So for myself, I'm actually a co-founder of XYZ. We started off Project XYZ since 2016 or 15. Me and my partner Amos, we started off the initiative as a student lead initiative. So at first we did some competition proposal, event curation. I mean, that's pretty much maybe one. We did one at Kongsi KL. That's probably the most ambitious one, I would say. Fast forward to 2 years ago, because of COVID, and I started off podcasts. So far, all the podcasts are recorded and it's on Spotify. So feel free to have a look. And I think that's pretty much influenced by Hans Obris, the curator from Serpentine Gallery, who did so many interviews with artists and architects. So that's pretty much make me, propel and motivated in doing all these interviews. And also at the same time, I'm also an office manager at Unagru Architects. So it's a small practice, 4 people practice, including myself, in London. So the reason why, I think how I got in touch with Nick, we sort of decided to do a series of sharing session about business, because personally, that's pretty much my interest as well. I always keen in questioning what the future profession would it be, and that's pretty much my thesis as well. In a way, especially in digital era, what defines the role of architects, and of course, I don't get me wrong, I mean, architects do play and wear different kind of hat. As a project manager, at some point you need to be a quantity surveyor, you need to come out with the costing and all. And then at the same time, you need to be like a craftsman, you need to be like a designer. So that's, what draws me into this interest in a way, to question the profession and also the role of architects or designer or interior designer, whatever you want to call this. So I think that's also relates to a few questions that we're going to share. For example, from here, we can see, so the second one, about resources and management, fee, behind the scene, and also marketing and social media, business development, and all this. So the reason why I would like to talk about this, because one is, we are all architecturally trained, but, business side is not one of the things. I mean, what I find, architectural practice tend to integrate between philosophy and project management, but we don't talk about business management. So that's one part that I find it lacking in a way. Especially, which I understand, because the whole architectural education and practice, there's a bridge that is missing in a way. We started off as an apprentice, or as an architectural assistant, but we often thought that business is not our league yet, because we always thought that, okay, let's work in the practice for 10 years or 20 years, then only we talk about practice. But I see nowadays a lot of young people tend to come out with their own, practice as well. Like Nick as well, he himself is quite young and run a practice. So that's, I mean, as I know, a lot of young practitioners, they come out with their own practice is tough, because you don't really, compared to like 40 or 50 years ago, the trend seems to be like, you work in the practice for long enough, and then you become a director, you take on the project, and then you come out from your own practice. By then you're like 40, 40 to 50 maybe, or maybe at least 35. So that's pretty much draw my intention and attention in architectural practice. And also the reason why, I mean, I will share why this motivation. And so one is because I find the missing link between the practice and education. So that's one. Two is I find we try to avoid ourselves being too delusional in design and philosophy. I mean, of course, it's important. It defines who you are as a designer and what kind of concept or quote unquote style that you would come up. But at the same time, there seems to be, you can come up with a practice, but how to run it, and then all the quality assurance, that's another level of management or organization that we need to be aware of. So Lanai did this survey a few months ago about this salary and job survey, which, that's sort of sent out a very alarming call, like why part one can earn such a amount like below 2,000, how can they survive in a city? And how about part two? And also, part of the reason why I would like to talk about this is we try to liberate the idea of, studying architecture doesn't mean that you have to be architects in a way. There are so many things that you can do. So doing this part of the, that's part of the intention where we wanted to open up more conversation and try not to strict yourself in such a limited boundary where, especially nowadays, you can see architectures send out so many trajectory into different kind of direction. Architectural renderings is one thing, social media is one thing, purely talking about marketing is one thing. So I think what Nick can actually understand, because as a director, you need to be very hands-on and more holistic in a way. You need to like talk about business and all marketing and business, money making part, the financial sustainability, and also what are the concepts that you would like to go for, and of course customer satisfaction. That's also part of the thing. So what about we talk about like motivation? Why are you so keen to be part of this series as well? I mean, perhaps you can share a little bit from your teaching experience as well. You taught in architectural academy for a few years.
I did it as a part-time for about, I would say, 2 to 3 years. And then somehow might be a blessing in disguise that because it was part-time contract, so they didn't renew the contract. But at that point, I was getting a bit bored because every year it was the same projects. I mean, of course, it's good to speak to students, especially at that level. I think I was teaching year 2.
Yep.
Year 2, so when speaking to this
young designers,
crowd, young designers, I had to be wary of my language and how I break down certain ideas. It forced me to be a bit more articulate in explaining things in a more layman manner. And that made me question my own thought and certain process. Certain things, it's very natural to you, but then for you to need to explain to a beginner, I think that's a skill to have, and that taught me a lot in trying to simplify my idea and my language. And of course, because I do residential, my clientele, they are not designers, so I can't really use bombastic design words. They don't like the auntie who's renovating his house. You think she cares about, I don't know, hierarchy, proportion, things like that. So I have to adjust my language, and that's how So that was an interesting point in my life. But it's been a while, and at that point, I was questioning if I should continue teaching in maybe other institution, but I guess I didn't have the motivation. Maybe my interest was more to a more mature crowd, in the sense that maybe working professionals or people starting out on their own. So that's where I'm at the moment.
That's an interesting question, because when it comes to like teaching back then, when you were acting as a tutor, the language, the vocabulary is different. We talk about views. It's not just about, like telling a customer saying that when you stand here, you can see this. Not as simple as that. We tend to be quite more philosophical, theoretical in our use of words. So what I find, during the study, we tend to be, when speaking of soft skill, I think presentation skill, that's critical in a sense, how to sell your idea in a way. So how do you find the balance, try to teach the students, or to allow them to be ready in the realistic world? So there are certain things that, you can't say that, oh, as student A, you can't say like this. When you say like this, the money gonna cost things like this. Or when you say like this, you're gonna offend a certain things. Or when you say like this, your idea is not strong enough. So how do you gauge that in, telling the students not to business side, but yet at the same time, you wanted to let them know that, there is certain things that you don't see when it comes to realistic market or industry?
I think I always try to stand on the student's perspective rather than on my perspective and what I know, because the student does not know or does not care about things that I know or care about the things that I care about.
Yeah.
And they are only in the second year, so I have to be a bit more conservative in my comments. That's why architecture takes so long to complete, right? There's so many. You take your time. You don't need to know. In your first year, if you're designing a small pavilion, I don't think you need to know about staircase, bomba, running distances. There's a lot more important stuff with the craft for now. So that's why whenever we go for final presentation, regardless of the year, and I see practitioners, having this type of advices on the students, I think I don't know. I don't know what's the balance actually. Like I feel it's a bit demotivating because you're just trying to pile on certain issues that you care about to the students, and not being empathetic enough on their situation. Because
Yeah.
I feel that the role of a tutor is not really to teach them any concepts about designing, or what you feel about that certain building type. It's about helping them to create a building based on their brief or their intention. So it's not really about you and what you think about how a pavilion works. I feel it's more of them, what they're actually trying to achieve, and teach them maybe show them the method and the technique to get there. So that's why I think, and the funny thing, it's like I was searching to educate this young kids or young students, and the root word of educate, when we talk about educate students or clients, it's almost like saying that we pile on this information on them. But the root word of educate is educe. Educe means to extract out. So meaning it's our job as educator to extract out what the client or the students want to achieve. I think that's the important thing. So I think teaching, and what I realized over the years is that I think teaching, it's a discipline on its own. Some people, they have a lot of knowledge, but they maybe don't have the soft skills to teach. And so the information gets lost in the translation or the method of delivery.
So, personally, I find internship is very important in this case to, to expose to the industry, to understand what you like and what you don't like. Well, personally myself, I know that I won't, work in a big corporate firm because I know that's not my preference, because I know that I prefer to do residential, small projects, cultural projects, or even commercial projects. I tend to be, the small one rather than, mega project. So what I thought is the business or knowledge, or how a practice run behind the scene is always important to let the students understand in a way. Not year 2, that might be too early. I think year 3, before they graduated, they should understand a certain things, because when you comes to the practice, there will be a director, or the boss will guide you, but then in their mind, they also need to calculate how much salary they pay you, and also how much the cost they need to run a practice. There must be a reason why they hire a certain people, because in order to generate value, it's not like I give you money and then I can't earn back the money. The practice is gonna collapse one day. and that's the thing that I hope I can learn earlier, because so that I know that when I'm working in a practice, I know that what are the things that I need to do, and how to value priorities as well. Perhaps from your perspective, you are not planning to hire anyone yet, isn't it?
We just hired a part-timer.
That's fine.
Yeah, so it was a good balance, because she wants time to think about, on her personal side, to plan certain things, maybe a side business, and on my side, we are also trying to control the costs. So I think
Mm.
being part-time, it's a win-win situation for both of us. So that's quite an interesting time to learn how to deal with um, part-timers.
Yeah, yeah. Especially like when it comes to a point where the workload is not like super packed, you don't feel like you need so much resources. So you mentioned about your working experience in Singapore. So you were working as a project architect in a way.
Yep, design and project architect.
How was it like when you were working there?
It was good. It was good to see a difference, but I never really got to the mega projects. So this is perhaps that built my interest in doing residential projects. I think I worked for two companies there, both bosses in a business term. In business perspective, both bosses were really different. The
Mm,
first one is a small firm, maybe 4 or 5 of us. He is a bit more conservative in terms of like business and um, smaller houses, a bit focus more on the practical side.
yeah.
And at that point, and in general, I feel that the architecture in UK, especially the education that I got, it's also a bit on the conservative side. It's about, looking at what your neighbors has done and not trying to stand out. And I brought this mentality to the first company. And when I went to the second company, and the boss was really more of an artist. So I see a totally different side of how an
Mm,
architect run
mm,
the office. So the second company was maybe about 15 to 20 of us. And he's
right.
a really passionate designer, and that sort of like ignited a fire in me because
Mm,
he's maybe about 40, he was about 50 years old, and the way I hear him talk about design, he is almost like a student, can see like he's almost like a child explaining the design, and he does all the preliminary design in hand sketch, and then somebody has to translate that into CAD drawing.
yeah.
So I really see the two different side of the way you can run your business. And
Mm,
also I can see the difference in the fee. So the second company, the fee for a same house is about 2 to 3 times more.
mm,
So that made me question, like, how can someone command, a different price for maybe the same typography of a house,
mm,
typology of a house.
mm.
So that's what is quite interesting. But I think looking back, there was a lot of things that I didn't understand in terms of the whole process from the start till the end, in terms of the architecture consultation and also the the construction side.
Mm.
Maybe at the time I didn't know myself better to question things. So people are feeding me information in parts, but I never really knew the whole story until I came back and had to figure out what's the from A to deliver from
Mm.
getting the client to handing over the keys. So that's one of the things that I had to learn the hard way, as the practice and me individually had to grow and evolve.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm someone that
Right.
I'm not someone that's very intellectual. So whenever you tell me an information, I really have to know the whole big picture, and then I know this piece of information belongs to stage
Mm.
10 or stage 12. And the same thing as well when my wife tells me story at work. She hates it because I have to ask, you're talking about this colleague, he or she working
What's
for
the
which
what's the
department?
context?
Yeah, what's the context? Which department? Why are you all crossing over projects? So she hates it when she tells story and I interrupt her. So that's me in the process of getting to know how my brain works, and that's what I realized if I look back at my time in Singapore.
Are you an ENTP?
No, I think. Oh, I can't. I think it's I because I'm introverted.
Mm.
I N. Okay, I'm not gonna butcher it because but definitely I only know the first one because I'm very introverted, and that's
Interesting.
how a lot of the business decision that I make for my studio is revolve around me and how my personality is, what type of projects or clients that I like to take on. Yeah.
I do have a question, standing from a point of view of a young graduate. For example, I just recently graduated and I always wanted to know how a business run in a way. I mean, of course, design is always draw us to a certain company, like, what a certain company produce their works and their portfolio sort of say a certain things that why we wish to work with a certain firm. So that's, that where comes in the design part, not really about the business yet. We are not, how they run a practice is not our first impression in a way. looking at the practice, we look at the works, and then you know what's their strength in a way. But as an architect, or architectural assistant, when you join in, you don't see the picture of behind the scene where administration and also management. How do you get that, or how do you learn that when, especially for me, it's different because I'm like legit working as an administration and office manager. So that's my job. I mean, I don't really care about the drawings and all this, even though I went through this. But my priority now is more of the business side. But how about you? Like, what's after you work as an architecture assistant and straight away running a practice, that must be quite different. And how do you learn the another side of the knowledge? Do you need to go through like business course or other approach to allow you to know more about practice? And not just about that, there must be like, in the legislation part, like regulation, or how to register a company, what are the boundaries that you cannot cross, or things like this. Then how do you know that? How do you obtain all this information? Is it through conversation with friends mostly?
Yeah, I think I wasn't too worried about the administrative part, meaning what type of company to register as, where do you go. I think that one is quite easy to obtain either from an accountant or somebody else running
Right.
a company, regardless of the industry. So I think I was more concerned about maybe certain business concepts, business ideas, and try to learn that the hard way. And so I try to be a bit more positive. Like, yes, I haven't been employed before in Malaysia in this industry. So the way I look at it is that I'm not being corrupted by any bad practices in the past. So
Yeah.
I come here with a clean slate, and that is why I am quite fast moving. Maybe some people will say impatient, because I will try an idea, be conscious and present about the effort, and then if it doesn't work, then I will switch my direction.
Yeah.
And then I will look again what's the result. So like if you talk about the way we charge, like how we charge clients, I think over the past 8 years I've tried maybe 10 different styles, and then I just go on and adjust until I find a way that works for me and the company. And in terms of business exposure, so I tried taking on courses, read books. I'm genuinely interested in it. So I don't really feel pressured or feel that it's like doing homework by reading. So I read a lot of business books over the years, and my target for the past 5 years has always been about 20 to 24 books a year. So that's about a book every 2 books a month or a month and a half. And
And
even
it's
though
all about business.
mostly I like psychology as well. So but psychology books are always on the edge of self-help. And when people talk about self-help books, it's just like, oh, just like auntie's book or people trying to feel good about themselves, But I like a lot of psychological explanation on everyday things.
Yeah, that's important,
so
because when you are talking to a client, you know what's their gesture and what do they like, what they don't like, and then you need to find a way to draw more conversation. I'm sure whether introvert or extrovert, there must be a certain things that we can talk about. It's just a method of like how to approach, or and and I don't think it's getting to know the first client doesn't mean that you have to make the maximum money from them, but rather to make a friendship first and to understand what are the values that we can provide as a professional and what are the values they can get as a customer. So that's the different agenda in a way, because compared to, you buy a Coca-Cola, it's different. It's just RM1 or RM2, but then we talk about construction costs is a few thousand. So there must be a certain consideration. Without talking about, they might consider other designers. It's a very competitive market as well.
Yes, it is. And
So
and that's why I think, because the entry, the price for entry is very low these days. The barrier to entry, sorry. So that's why you see a lot of and information can be obtained online. So that's why you see a lot of younger practitioners, because there's no gatekeepers anymore with the rise of social media and internet. So it's very easy to set up your own company. But I guess because of that, then the market is now very saturated. So there's every other week I see new designers popping out on my Facebook feed. So I think it's a good market for the consumer, because you have a lot of choices. But I guess for the vendors, for the practitioners, I think it's time to equip themselves with some business knowledge. You don't have to know, I think, every single detail. It's more of business concepts or ideas so that you can make a more informed decision. That's what I think.
So in general, I mean, what I found about this social media also allows the customer to be more confident with the industry as well. I mean, back then, as I know, perhaps 20 or 30 years ago, even we ask our, the generation before us, they don't really care about designer. They just wanted to be practical. So in that sense, they can find a contractor to do whatever they like. I mean, without the involvement of designer, at some point, contractor can even design the things for them. So that's where I think that's the at the edge of the topic where we wanted to talk about, because we as a designer, how can we help? Otherwise, I mean, technically, I'm not saying the contractor are the business who actually stealing jobs from us. In the end, we still need to depend on them who actually build the things. But it's just that to elevate the service to another level where the designer comes in and consult aesthetic part, especially, that's where the tough part, because means extra money for the consumer to pay for, because that's how I see money as well. It's all circulating. I mean, the clients get the money from the company they work for, the company get the money from the general consumer, and then it's cycle end again. And then, but I'm not sure in Malaysia how do you find this cycle, because it depends on the context where so I had a conversation with my friend, and it's very interesting it's just talk about art and how people can actually willing to pay or spend money on art is actually reflecting on the whole economy of a country. I mean, it's not just about art, it's about food as well. For example, in Malaysia, why people willing to pay for 50 ringgit for nasi lemak in a fancy restaurant is actually reflecting on how economy works in our country. Because if we have a larger appetite or larger spending power, means that the designer or other sector can actually get more money in a sense. Because otherwise, if let's say we talk about like everyone is saving money, don't want to spend money, it will be stagnant, isn't it? I mean, everyone say, oh, everyone is a millionaire, but they don't want to spend money, then we are all GG. We are all effed up in a way, because we don't know where to get the money from, because they don't want to spend the money. And in order to make them to spend the money to understand where is the value, is social media is one of the things, to make them to understand that if you pay a certain money, or if you identify your goal in hiring a designer, that's what you get. And then things like nice design in a way. Yeah, so I'm not sure, what do you think, like in this case, like in a broader sense of understanding money and value?
I think there's two parts to it. I think the first one is that we are at the age of abundance now, meaning whatever that we have more than enough.
Yeah.
Right. So we are not at the stage maybe at our parents or our grandparents stage. Our grandparents probably experienced the war and then things are building up. And then our parents, are the first generation that maybe able to go to higher education, a lot of them, but not all. And then we are even at this age now, we have house, we have cars to drive to college. We are not, we have a lot more than our parents did. And of course, our parents had a lot more than their parents did. So in the age of abundance now, that we are able to, that we spend more on artistic things and things that improve our lives. So that says something about the value. And the interesting thing is that, and it took a long while to convince me, is that they say that a lot of the purchases or spending made, most of them is done through the emotional side of the brain. And then we use the practical part of the brain to really explain that, to really post-rationalize that purchase decision. So that's why people are spending money on luxury items, watches, cars, right? Technically, cars, 4 wheels can get you from A to B, but why are people spending 1 million on a certain type of cars? So that says something. And the same as houses. And I had to learn this the hard way, because when I was in Singapore, the houses that we built the construction cost at that time was maybe about 350 to 400 Sing per square foot. So that's about 1,200 to 1,300. And then when I came back to Malaysia, a lot of the owners that I met initially weren't even willing to spend 50 ringgit per square foot. So I really had to adjust the ego and try to understand the value of things, or how different people value different things. So when
I mean, when it comes to that, what do you think is the reason why people are not willing to spend? I'm sure there must be a lot of rich people in Malaysia. Why the whole industry or the cycle? One is why the fee is so low in a way. I mean, that could be related to the profession within the profession. And also, how does it relate to the consumerism in a way why people not willing to pay so much, even though is it because our Malaysian design is not good enough? Which I don't think so, because I think Malaysia is full of talent. Why do you think this scenario would happen? Is it because of is it really because of market? Like, oh, everyone tend to say, oh, Malaysian market is bad, but I don't think so. Is everyone always say the market is bad, every day is bad? I mean, when would you say market is good?
I mean, I try to not look at it as a not try to stereotype or say, because every consumer is different. So what I've learned over the years is that whenever people value something in their life, they will find a way to make it work.
Sure.
If they value social approval, they will find a way to make it work by paying the extra 3 or 4K a month for the expensive car.
Sure.
If they value fashion, so then they will spend money on that certain type of clothes or bags and things like that. And so I didn't, even at that time, I wasn't really very cynical about it. Like, okay, why so cheapo? Why you don't that? Why you not willing? So for me, it's just that, okay, that the value of that client and me is not aligned, meaning they are actually not, they say that they want to spend on a house or renovating the house, but actually the value is not that. They place more priorities on other things, which is fine. So I don't judge them. So maybe having a nice car is more important to them because everybody can see it, whereas house, nobody can see it, only your own family. So that's what I had to learn over the time. So I try not to judge them. So I just look from within, because we can't really control what other people do. So I just look from within and try to do my branding and marketing better so that I can find clients who are more in line with my values. And also, and then also I try to look within my sales funnel, my sales process. Maybe it's me saying that, oh, maybe I didn't do a good job enough to show that there's a value in nice design in the house. So I try to look at, to see the processes that I can improve rather than just complaining about clients.
I just have a very general question, because currently, I mean, of course, from my understanding from my work, in the practice that where I'm working now, so we tend to set a certain benchmark where we don't want to. It's not like we cannot do or don't want to do a certain projects that is too small budget, because we have to understand the whole resources as well. Whether it's big or small, we have to go through the process. Even though it's a small project, we need to go through tender as well. We need to go through construction, and all this is all the same, whether it's a £100,000 project or £300,000 project. Of course, the handling cost and effort is much more difficult as the cost goes up. I just curious, like, when in your scenario, what would be the minimal benchmark to identify is the right one? Of course, we can't be too ambitious, because when it comes to like 1 million or 2 million project, that means that you have to spend more time on it, because we are talking about the material. It's not just about typical plywood. It might be marble, it might be something else. So the handling fee automatically will be higher. In your case, what would be the minimum, like, and in the market so far, do you target, what are the customer crowd that you are targeting at? Do you targeting at the mid-high spending group in a way? But then it's tough one. So, but it's a tough one, because when it comes to the low, I won't say low income, but rather is the smaller spending power, doesn't mean that they don't deserve a good design, but it's just that there is a certain factors. For example, the customer just can't just come in and say, okay, I have a budget of 5,000 and I expect to do so much things. There must be a realistic spectrum that they have to consider about, because you have to consider what contractor, there's a labor cost, there's a material cost, there's a fee included as well. So what is the margin that we are looking at? It's much more optimum. Is it like 50,000 Malaysia ringgit? Are you able to do things as a minimum in a way?
For me, I think we look at it from a rate per square feet. So we try to advise them that for us, if we do it, it will be at least 100 to 150 ringgit per square foot for renovation. And so depends on the size. So if it's 500 square foot and if it's within that rate, usually the smaller the property, the rate goes higher a bit. But usually we try to advise around there. And if they say no, their budget is a lot lower, then I have to make an executive decision to whether to look at, because I don't want to be bounded by ego and say, no, this is too cheap for us.
Yeah.
So I want to look at our situation. Are we busy? Do we really need this project to survive? If it's not, then I'll say, sorry, we can't do it. Let me refer you to other people who may be able to serve you better. So for us, the client, I think the ideal client for us is clients with more money than time, meaning they have the money, but they don't have the time to go and handle the nitty-gritty, and that's where we come in the picture. Because I think for me, design is only maybe 5% that opens the door, that makes the client click on our website and view us and call us. But if at the end of the project they are satisfied with us, most likely it's because of our service and how we treat them and how we guide them through the whole process. At the end, it's their house, it's not my house. So I don't really, or maybe because I don't see myself as an artist or designer, I don't really have that pride, like, oh, this is my baby. For me, it's for them. And so over the years also, we tried on with so many different type of projects, different type of budget. So if you draw a bell curve, right, a curve like that, so that's how I say x-axis would be the budget, and y-axis will be the complexity of the project. So of course, at the lower left-hand side corner, when the budget is very tight, so of course it's very complex because you have to find a lot of ways to do a lot of things. And as the budget grows, then the complexity goes down. Right? So it's inverted. So the complexity go down. So the more budget you are, of course, you have, obviously it's easier to do things. But I feel that there's a tipping point at the center where money becomes more of an obstacle now.
Right.
For me, I mean, it's not scientific. Right?
Sure.
It's just an anecdotal theory. So as the more money you have, meaning you can explore with more materials, then maybe you have to think about imported stuff. You have to think about custom making stuff. So for us, the sweet spot is always at the bottom part there. That is you have enough budget to do a lot of things, but not too much that you start introducing a lot of the other stuff, maybe imported stuff or custom making stuff and things like that. Yeah, so that's where our sweet spot is.
Well, I think when it comes to that, it's not just about money, but also reflected the idea of time is money as well. I mean, if it's a small project, it's not saying that we can't spend too much time on it. It's just that we don't have enough resources in a way. Running a practice, that there's a small project, of course, you can have a very conventional idea, try to think about the way to save money in a way. But in order to do that, we need to spend more time, which I think is tough because we only given a certain limit of budget, and how can we allocate the same time as we doing a 1 million or 10 billion project? It's difficult because
totally agree.
If like we are working on a skyscrapers, how do you expect us to spend that amount of time on a 500 ringgit project, for example? So that's the reason why it's not just about money talking, but also the time. And why would I wanted to spend like 40 hours just to design a house with you while I can use the time to do other projects?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's interesting, this relationship between the budget and the time, because if let's say a 1,000 square foot property and the budget is 100,000, let's say for easy calculation, and let's say 1,000 square foot, 100,000 ringgit, and you spend maybe 4 months at it. If your budget is 50,000 for that same 1,000 square feet, doesn't mean 2 months you got him or you finish the project. You still need to spend at least 3.5 months, let's say,
mm.
so it's like 3.5 months you earn 50,000, 4 months you earn 100,000. It's like you add 2 more weeks, you earn the double the fee.
Sure.
So it's quite interesting, the relationship that you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason why I become more aware, since I mean in our practice we use this software to identify or navigate how much time we spend on each stage.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to know, let's say tender is only 40 hours, you don't spend too much, because if you spend too much time, what about other 7 or 8 projects?
Yeah.
You already wasted in a way. Not
Yeah.
wasted, you invest in a wrong time or wrong project, then
Yeah,
you
that's
get
right.
distracted, and then they are more, how about, when it comes to client who are actually much more demanding, then how can we handle that? That's also another realm that people don't see, and not all
Sometimes
the
it's a
time.
culture as well. Like our Asian culture is whatever that comes in the door that we can take it. We should just take it because it's money.
And then we don't know how to
so
say
it's like,
no.
yeah, that's right. So it's always better to be a bit more, analytical and find out the value of your time, I guess.
I mean, there comes to a point where, because I try to learn from, where I used to work and also working now, is to understand, really there are certain things that you really just need to let go. It's time, then that's it. You don't spend too much time on design. It will be endless in a way. And client will just, they will keep on following up. In the end, the project is just won't happen, and it's just dragging and dragging. And I find a statement of in this book, it's called How to Win Work. It's written by office manager, business development manager in MVRDV, Jan Nickel. And I find it very interesting, because he said that architectural business is actually selling of time, because we are not selling a product in a way. If we really think about it, we are selling our time as a professional, and we are charging our time based on, we are charging our fee based on time, whether it's lump sum or percentage or time based. It's all, money is time in a way.
I think any service-based company is like that as well, selling the time. That's why it's really difficult to scale a design practice, because you want to earn more money, then you just got to hire more people, because you need to put in more hours, and we are only limited to 24 hours in a day. Yeah, so that's why a lot of the service-based company, at the end, they try to productize their services, meaning instead of trading the knowledge to a single or 2 clients, they write a book, and then they spend the time to that book. So whether you sell 100 books or 100,000 books, you only spend an initial amount of time writing that book.
Yeah. I mean,
so we were also exploring that part of the business.
Yeah, I mean, there comes to a point why I try to understand, if let's say I running a practice, how do I gauge the administration part? Because there's no benchmark or reference point. Because if we look at Lembaga or ARB, there is a certain limit saying that, per year there should be a certain salary for part 1 or part 2 or part 3. There's a minimum. But when it comes to administration part or social media, it's quite hard to gauge, because it's up to the direction of a company as well. And sometimes you do more or less the marketing. How can we judge? And return of investment, how do we gauge that, is quite difficult. And the time to find leads also, that's another difficult things that we, as until you become a director, then you only know all these stressful things. but
yeah, because we are never really taught or exposed all this in school.
Yeah. And also, what's the the potential, and to the how to increase the possibility to turn a leads to a, I mean, from a prospective client to leads become a confirmed client, is a few stage going on there. And compared to doctor is different, because doctor say that, okay, you see me, you pay us X amount of money. But for designer, perhaps give out a 1 or 2 hours just to have a conversation first, and you can't charge them because it's a consultation. It's like a free service to make friends first. I think that's what I find. I mean, perhaps in service industry, especially in design, is quite hard to find the balance.
I think it's because, using doctors as an example, I feel that it's because in a creative endeavor, the client and the service provider may not have the same goal or understanding on what the goal is. Like maybe the designer has their own agenda and the clients have their own agenda, whereas in the doctor, it feels more both, like the goal for both of them is for the patient to get better. Where so when like the doctor maybe doesn't have any other, apart from maybe monetary compensation, maybe he doesn't have any other. It's quite straightforward, the goal, right, to make the patient better. Whereas in the creative, it's very. I think I think that's why that the one of the skill is to hone down on the goal to make sure they're on the same page. Like if I go to a haircut, maybe the hairdresser's goal is to make give me a haircut that is memorable, that can be on the social media. But for me, it's like I just want something that's easy to maintain, that it's not about being nice, for example. Yeah. So I think that's the interesting part of it. And that's why I feel that designers should equip themselves more on business knowledge, so that they can get all this information and align these goals together with the client.
Right. How do you find, like, I mean, so far you have running a practice for about 4 years now?
My practice?
Yeah.
8 years.
8 years, sorry.
Yeah.
Reduced almost half. How do you see business now, as in like the definition of business? Well, I mean, I can start off with an example, because how I see business is about value. It's about value exchange. It's not just about money, but of course, to make friends and to understand, to know more people, to have fun, to have certain values and understanding what are the personality. And it's not all the time that client can be a good friends, of course, and also not all the time that good friends can be client as well. So in the end, it's about the value. It's not just about, it's about creating memories as well. I mean, it's a nice interior to make them to feel happy about it. That's also part of value. And without talking about money in this case yet, I mean, the process will comes in later, talks about money. But how do you see business in the sense like monetary, may it be monetary or wealth or fortune or on the finance in running a practice?
I think for me, it's just helping the clients or the homeowner to achieve what they want. So so it's very important for me to find out why they want to do certain things. Like earlier, I was I met a client that has lived in the house for 10 years and the kids is still quite young. So usually at times when they want to refurbish a house that is already they're staying in, maybe the kids are getting married, but this one, the kids are still young, so I had to go through the process of asking them what's the motivation, what's their concern. Are they concerned about contractors cheating them the money, or are they concerned about delay in timeline because maybe they have to rent out another place? So for me, it's just to help them get to where they want to get to. And then if using the house is one of the tools, then so be it.
Right. I think that's interesting. It's a very interesting conversation to start off the following episodes. That's I hope all the audiences who are listening to you can always approach to us. Of course, we are always happy to have a debate or conversation about all this. Right. I think that's pretty much about it for today. Thanks a lot, Nick. I think there must be a lot of things that we can catch up more in detail in the following 4 episodes.
I think the next episode where we'll get a bit more detailed, maybe a bit more in depth. And if we're gonna get in another guest, then I think that'll be even more interesting to hear a different perspective. Yeah. And these guests are not just, some of them might be in this industry, but some of them might just be in any other creative field. So I think that would be quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that's tough because compared to big corporate, they have their own very corporate way to do things. But when it comes to creative, for example, like yourself, when you're running a practice in a very, very small amount of resources, for example, lower than 4%, is different. It's different because the turnover is not like as high as the corporate world, but it's much more intact in a way to stay with the very, very low profile to run a practice. And usually the profit margin is not as high because the budget is like this. You can't really make, I think it's only like what, 10% or lower than that, the fee. So not really do any justice to make a lot of big money, but rather it's I think from a small creative practice, that's much more obvious in a way, because running a small practice, you can see the money much more in a clearer picture. So that's pretty much what we're going to talk about. But of course, in the future, we hope can get some big architecture firm CEO or director to talk about their business. That would
that'll be
be
interesting to find out their own perspective. But what I want to say is I also hope can encourage more people to talk to have this sort of conversation, because maybe some people may think that business and design is two separate things. Like, oh, I want to focus on my design only, I want to focus on my craft, and the business will come later. But I feel that it's a bit more integrated than we think. So to finish off, maybe I'll say like putting effort on understanding, reading, and putting effort on the business side of things enabled me to enjoy the creative part even more.
And that's what I really recently always quite focusing on, the USP, unique selling point. And you know what you're good at is actually drawing the certain customer to you. I mean, otherwise they could have just reached out to anyone, then there's no preference.
Yes.
They can just find another Nick or any other Gary to, you know, to design the things. But there must be a certain things that they, you know, they like about, not just about service, but also, you know, a certain aesthetic value, or how do we see beauty. That's another you know, it's like almost like a matchmaking in a way, you know. And how do we how the designer and the client can click together. That's actually very special in a way. Great, thanks a lot for listening. And so we will catch up.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, Nick. So we will catch up for the next episode. Hopefully will be next week, and then we will you know, feel free to share around, and we have a different kind of guests. And then I think it will be very interesting, because I think so far what I see, the guests are different, you know, from different side of the practice, not just about architectural practice. So that could be something that we can talk about. So thanks a lot, Nick. Thanks again. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you for having me. I'll see you soon.
See you soon then. Right.
Okay,
bye.
take care. Bye.